Join Jared Latigo, Camille Baransom, and Taylor Perky for the episode 2 of the Cultivate podcast with special guest Ed Mathews of Tabernacle Baptist Church. Don't forget to like and share this post. Now for your host, Jared and Camille.
I love this.
This intro is amazing.
Hey, since it's still January, I'm going to say, and welcome to 2020.
There you go.
They hate me for that. I'm going to do it till the end of the month. Okay.
I read a blog post from Seth Godin. You know, Taylor calls him my boyfriend. He's a
your man crush.
Guy.
Yeah.
And anyways, he was saying how I think his first one was years like seeing clearly in 2020. He's like, I've been waiting 30 years to use that title. You know, it's like
that's a long term.
That's a lot. Yeah. I mean, he's been a writer for his whole life, so it's like he probably has been thinking about that. I thought it was pretty funny. So, well, Ed, thanks for coming on. You are obviously the pastor of Tabernacle Baptist Church in Burleson, Rendon area over there. And today we're going to talk about servant leadership. So before we get into the topic, I want to thank everyone for watching. If you are watching live, be sure to drop comments about servant leadership, anything related to, running a business, leadership principles, those type of things. And we'll see if Ed can answer some of those and field some of them. So be sure to like and share this post. And if you're listening to this as a podcast, we would appreciate a share and a subscription on there as well. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Join us, because I can't say welcome to 2020 for too much longer.
That's right. You absolutely can't.
Or at least they'll start editing me out.
That's
prepared
true.
for that.
Taylor will edit you out. Taylor, can you make sure you edit her out if she says 2020 again?
Don't listen to him. Let's get to the real stuff. Okay.
Awesome. All right. Okay, so servant leadership. Really important topic. I feel like it is pretty common in churches, organization type things to some degree, but not so common in corporate world, right? Do you kind of agree with that, or?
No, I don't agree.
Okay.
I don't agree with it. From the standpoint of it's common. It's a common statement that's made in churches, but actual seeing it played out, I think, is a different animal.
Okay.
It's hard in the corporate environment to be a servant leader, only from the standpoint, especially if you're in the leadership management positions, because you're not expected. Once you attain to a certain position, you don't do these other things, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't do those. Now, to some degree, you don't do it because you got people hired to do that. You're supposed to be doing your job, but there's and it really has to do with less about getting back to your old job and trying to do, because that's one of the mistakes that new managers make, right? They are comfortable in their old job, and so they won't let go of it when they move to a new position.
Right. Okay.
That's not what we're talking about. I don't know what the servant leadership is about. It's about how you treat people, right, and how you pay attention. And one of the things we say, we try to encourage, or how do I be a servant leader? Probably the first big thing you got to do is pay attention.
Okay.
Pay attention to what's happening and what other people are doing. And you might be a manager or senior manager. You see somebody that's struggling with something to pick up,
right?
Just helping them. Very simple things.
Level of like empathy, right? To some degree.
Yeah, it can be empathy
understanding
as well.
Where they're coming from and what they're struggling with, and
it's about how you see yourself in relationship to the other person.
Okay.
In Philippians 2, it tells us other men's needs should be ahead of our own. Mm-hmm. So. Again, it's not about taking over someone else's job. It's just saying, so you're vice president of a company and you're walking, into a Walmart, if you have to, and you're walking into a Walmart and you see some lady struggling with kids, trying to hold kids and put bags in the back of her car, and just saying, here, let me help you with that. Right. He said, well, I don't do that because I'm vice president of, XYZ Corporation. It's like, no, servant leadership is paying attention to what's going on around you. In the Scripture, Jesus gives us the demonstration of that as the disciples are sitting down there, and all the disciples are sitting down, and like you would in any probably corporate environment, who can sit closest to the most senior manager in the room, right? And so they're all positioning and vying for a position at the table or at the couches, the way that they ate back then. And while they're sitting there trying to vie for a position, Jesus, picks up a towel, picks up a bowl of water, and washes their feet. Now, that's not unusual. That was normal. If you were a guest in someone's house, or you had a guest in your house, when they came in, you would offer them, if you were just being casually courteous, you'd offer them their own bowl and the towel to wash their own feet.
Right.
if you were a servant to them, you would wash their feet for them.
Right.
And so none of the disciples were ready to stoop to that. So their greatest leader stoops. And he says, do you know what I've done? And
Sure.
like, yeah, he says, this is what everybody else, when you're a leader, people do stuff for you. He says, not in this kingdom, you don't do that. In this kingdom, you're the one, as the leader, you're the one that's a servant to the others. And applying that in the corporate environment is sometimes, I mentioned, picking up, helping somebody pick something up. It's something as simple as managers, sometimes they'll spill coffee and they'll have their admin come in and clean it up. You made the mess, you cleaned it up.
Right.
I just don't do that. Well, it's less of your position and more of you telling me what kind of person you are, the character of who you are.
Okay.
And so I guess that's the introduction of the nutshell of the whole thing.
So is that kind of how you would define servant leadership? Like if you were to wrap it up in a couple sentences, like someone says, well, what is servant leadership? I don't even know what that means.
Yep. Jesus said that the one will be the greatest will be your servant.
There you go.
Well, and I think it might be important to mention too. I mean, you do have a corporate background before you really, and I don't want to butcher that. So maybe if you want to give us a little bit of your background. And,
sure.
Yeah.
I don't know how far back you want me to go. I started in data processing.
An hour, so.
Okay, yeah, then we'll go that far. I started out in data processing right after I got married in 1979, and got married, got into that position, and found out that I had an aptitude for it, and data processing and operations. And my pastor at the time asked me to come down here and be an associate for him down here. I was an associate for him up in Kansas, and so okay, but it worked out well because there's a few computer positions in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, so I found me a job. And I guess let me take us down this path. I was coming down here to be an associate pastor. I had several job offers, and I said, but I can't work on Sundays. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, if you can't work on Sundays, we need you to, manager position, tech position, whatever. it was Frito-Lay, it was Dr. Pepper, it was EDS. I was getting, he says, we want to offer you a position, but we won't because you can't.
Right.
Or it offers a position, I'd have to turn it down. So I ended up going over to, and that was kind of a last ditch thing. I went to Mervyn's. I don't know if you guys remember the Mervyn's clothing line.
Yeah.
Okay, so they were opening up a data center. And it was a skeleton. And when they were opening up, need someone to go in. And so I went in there and so talked to the guy and was like, this is great. We'll hire you. I said, okay, let me tell you, I can't work Sundays. And he goes, not a problem. It's blue law. We don't
Nice.
open up on Sundays anyway. So
I remember that law.
I'm in now this is all God. This is all a God thing. Right. And so we got in there and began to work there. And I was working for a gentleman, I won't name him here, but real good guy, crazy. We fit well together.
How about you do?
Yeah.
Crazy guys.
Crazy guys. And we were working, and we started to fill up the data center. We were working, Mervyn's is headquartered out of Hayward, California. So they were going to move processing down to Plano. And so I was putting these things together a piece at a time. Well, my manager, this guy I was working for, he was telling me how to do it, and the IBM guys were telling me how to do it, and he said, ignore the IBM guys, you do it the way I tell you to. And so, okay, because he's the one that wrote the check. So we were doing that, and then he decided to leave Mervyn's and go for Sanger Harris, which became
I remember
Fuller's.
that one too. Yeah.
Wow.
So he went to work. Yeah, I'm talking way back when.
We're
okay,
dating ourselves.
Yeah, I am. And so he went to work, and the IBM guy goes, "What happened to Ken?" And I said, "Well, he took a job somewhere else." He goes, "Man," I said, "You're going to miss him." I said, "I do." He says, "No, this guy he was known all over." Because the data processing environment's a pretty small community. Mm-hmm. He says, people respect him. He knew his stuff. I mean, he told IBM people what to do. I said, well, I know that. and so I didn't realize I was getting training from this guy.
That's awesome.
And it's a God thing, right? I wouldn't have been in there if I'd have been at Frito-Lay. Right. And so another guy came in, and he ended up leaving and going to Fidelity. And he goes, I need you over here. And so I go, well, more money. Okay, I'll go over there. Can't work Sundays. Yeah, okay. I know that. So basically got to go in as a startup in Dallas data center over in Irving. Don't know what it's called, the Dallas data center, but started there, and same thing that we did at Mervyn's. Started it up. There's very few pieces of equipment in there, and started it. So we got to hands on the whole thing. So now the long story getting shorter is that going from that to, as a ops manager into a VP of data center strategies over that 22-year period, and worked with set up state-of-the-art operations, set up state-of-the-art hardware management teams to actually put the equipment together instead of the IBM guys, and then managing 4 Tier 4 data centers and becoming that same person that Ken was 20 years later. So it was cool. And now, all that being said, practicing servant leadership in that environment is just the funniest thing to sit there as the senior manager, being the senior manager in a conference, getting up, grabbing the coffee pot, and going pouring coffee for other people. And part of it was servant leadership. Part of it was orneriness on my part, but
I'll second that.
Yeah, it was like, what are you doing? And we'd have food brought in because when we were there all the time. We seldom left, and so get up and help them. Do you want anything? Do you guys need anything? It's like, and then sit down and go, okay, here's what we're gonna do. It's like, wait a second, which are you?
Right.
Servant leader.
Yeah.
Servant leader. So it's. So watched God work through the whole thing, putting him first.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things I didn't put him first on, but that's an area that we put him first in. And he goes, here, I'll bless you with this. And then people seeing, I tell the story to the kids. I told them this yesterday about, I had a conversation with some IBM execs, and I say conversation, it was a monologue. They'd done something that I didn't care for, so we were having a conversation about it.
One of those conversations.
Can't believe you told them about it. You're so shy.
You're preaching there too,
I always just kind of beat around the bush on stuff. She can tell you that. Just don't beat around it. Just beat the bush and get done with it. But after they went up to my admin. My admin was also the CIO's admin. And so they go, boy, Ed he just cussed us up one side and down the other. And she goes, hold on a second. He said, he did not cuss you out.
No, you
she goes,
didn't.
oh man, he just, I'm telling you. And then so they were using some choice words and stuff. She goes, no. She goes, he got onto you and get onto you as good as anybody, but he did not cuss. And they go, well, okay, he didn't cuss. He didn't say any bad words. But
right.
But I think that's part of servant leadership. Yeah. The people that worked for me knew me well enough to know.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the character. And again, a lot of other things that we can just keep off the podcast. But there's
Sure.
things that look. This is how you operate. And people can trust the integrity of who you are by what they see that you do.
Yeah. No, it's really true.
Yeah, and so you carried that into what you do now from what you did before.
And it was a really easy move. That's not really easy. It's not. Dealing with a computer is a lot easier than dealing with a person. A computer's zeros and ones. A person is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's like, is it this or is it that, or
and emotions.
Computers don't have emotions,
right?
Which is helpful when you're trying to do something to it.
It's always funny to me when people get so frustrated with the computer, and I'm like, you're operating it. Like it doesn't do. I mean, it may be slower than you want it to go, but it's doing what you tell it
what
to do.
Yeah.
And people like it when folks just try, computers are evil. I said, computers aren't anything.
Right.
They're amoral. They have nothing. Right. It's what you do with them.
Exactly.
So anyway.
My computer has a personality. It doesn't like me very much. But I don't like it either. Well, I think, and I'm dumbing this down for myself, but I'm trying to think of how servant leadership, just in growing up in my dad's business, I think you hit a good point, because he would never ask anyone to do anything he wasn't willing to do himself. Mm-hmm. And so, it wasn't uncommon to go into the grocery store and he was scrubbing the floor or sacking the groceries or stocking his shelf. Mm-hmm. And people would, why are you doing that? Don't you have people for that? And he's like, it's got to get done. So I always admire that, and I try to think. I think that's probably one of the things that stuck with me early on. I haven't always done everything right. I know that surprises tons of people.
What?
I know, right?
I'm out.
I
I'm out.
haven't always been
ridiculous.
this
We've got to
perfect,
cut
no.
this podcast off completely.
No, right? You're kicking me out. But, that's something that stuck with me. And even to this day, in getting to have conversations with other people that worked with him. And I think that's the key word. They worked with him. No one really felt like they worked for him.
Right.
And he was the leader. He was a great leader. But so I try to carry that into what I do. Although I'm really proud of the hub because we got to finally hire a custodial, janitorial, whatever you call that. I mean, not a lot, but yeah, someone to help because, that was just one of the things I thought went along with it. And it did.
It's always fun to be able to say that you've made even a little bit, handed a little bit off. Right. And I think that's the mark of a leader is
legacy.
Yeah, exactly. But it's, a leader, I think, has to not only train up the next person, but they also have to be willing to delegate and trust that other person, right? And if you can't do that, then I don't think you're operating as a true leader. You're operating as essentially as a boss
or a control freak.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of people fall. That I'll even look at some of these larger corporations that I've come in contact with some people or whatever, and I've maybe had a conversation with them or something, and I look at it and I'm like, there's a little too much involvement from the CEO or from this person at the level that we're discussing this. Like, he shouldn't be in those conversations yet. He shouldn't be doing these things yet, because I feel like the hierarchy at that point, he should be working on bigger vision things. He should be working on these things, right? And at some point, yes, he gets involved in those conversations because it's a financial decision or it's a business direction or whatever it is. But you got to get to the point where you recognize that you can't be in everything. And if you're in everything, then you're just a control freak. And you can't hand it off, and that's a lack of delegation.
I think there's a balance to that. Because you said that at this level you don't get involved in that, and you reminded me of experience I had at Fidelity. Ned Johnson is the owner of Fidelity. He owns it. It's a privately held company, Fidelity Investments, and he does a tour through his data center. It's his. It's one of those weird things of if he walked into the data center and he wanted to take that monitor off the table, he could. It's his. He owns it, right? It's not board owned. He owns it. Yeah. So but he comes in and he again I had the ability to they give me a task and they expect you to become a subject matter expert in like 2 or 3 hours, right? And then we did in this particular area is in printing, and he walked back. He says, "Oh, just walk back there with me." He doesn't even know who I am. And so we walk back in the back. He tells the other guys to leave, and then he and I hop up on a printer table that's stomach high because they tear paper off the continuous form. And he goes, "Okay, explain to me how toner gets on the paper. How you get that toner on the paper and it's heated, and how could you get it on the other side?" And you'd think, well, you go do money stuff, and I'll, but he's the one that was funding me to be able to go work with IBM and other companies to say, this is how we want to invent this new thing. And so I agree with you that some managers, and I think managers that micromanage because they don't understand their own process.
Yeah.
But I think the other side of that is when you're trying to innovate something, you're trying to invent something, and people can't see that vision.
Right.
You got to get hands on.
Yeah.
So there's two sides to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hate to say it, and I don't sound demeaning at this. If you're working at Best Buy or you're working at McDonald's, and they've got a process, and you just get in and follow the process, and most of that's probably management is managing people time and schedules and making sure the patties, whatever kind of meat it is, comes in, right?
Meat.
Let's call it meat. Pink meat that comes in, it becomes a McRibs. But that type of management, managing versus leading. Managing, you take a process and you manage the process.
Right.
Leading says, let's go figure out what that process is going to be.
Yeah.
Right, and that's where I think that sometimes the leadership has to be more hands-on. Now, there's other cases of leadership where they need to be hands-off, although I'm not going to knock it because I like the way it's been working. Jerry Jones is a good example of not getting his hands off of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Although he can keep on doing that as long as he wants.
There. He loves the Cowboys.
Oh, yeah. I love where they're sitting.
He hates the Cowboys.
So
I'm sorry.
You just lost a bunch of people on the podcast.
I grew up in a football family, and my dad is, he bleeds, silver and blue, and he's had the truck, he's had the golf cart painted like it, all that, and it was awesome. Like, when I was growing up, that was like the thing that we always did. Of course, I was growing up where the Cowboys were in their prime. Like, we won back-to-back Super Bowls, and then a year later won another one. And so it was like...
Jimmy Johnson days.
Exactly, Jimmy Johnson. So, like, I remember all that stuff, going to Super Bowl parties, and it was like, Super Bowl, the Cowboys are in the Super Bowl. Like, that's how it works.
That's how it works, yeah.
And so anyways, I remember those, and then, of course, as I got older, everything fell apart. And, I'm not a huge sports fan. Never have been a huge one. I just kind of grew up that way. But I do understand the why people get so up in arms about that, because I do think that while he's a great businessman, like in terms of like what he's actually built from a business standpoint and from a brand, he's not the greatest leader. Like, he's really not any. And I think that most people would agree he needs to back off.
Jerry Jones?
Yeah.
Oh, no, he needs to keep his hands in it.
That's interesting. This could get
just
real.
put the cans on and go down there and just coach it,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I see where you're trying to get them to go. I see.
I was upset when they got rid of Garrett.
I bet you were.
Yeah. Keep him. I want a 5-year contract on him. But I'm a visionary, though.
Yeah.
We're not even allowed to wear blue at our church.
Oh,
no,
wow.
I'm just kidding.
That's not true.
That's not true. But
Wow, that's not
true.
He does make it. No, I don't do football. Was not a football family.
That's
we didn't
awesome.
do sports. We didn't do that. So
Yeah.
which I think is weird.
Well, probably because your dad worked like on the.
Well, he was a workaholic, so
Right, but he was in business all week, and then even though you were closed on Sunday, he was up here working on Sunday. Like, so
well,
it was
we went
kind
to
of-
church, and then we came down and we rode either our skates or our bicycles around while we're unloading, Bluebell, because whatever freezer was out or whatever cooler was out at the time. Between church, you could go, but we were not working.
But that's when football happens, is on Sunday, and if you're working,
I wouldn't
or you're-
know. I mean, he didn't fish. He watched rodeo, and I think, what is that Western guy that you talk about sometimes?
John Wayne?
Yeah, did you watch John Wayne? If he
Just told my age again.
yeah,
Did you just
sorry.
say what Western guy that is?
Yeah.
I did.
I don't even watch Westerns that I know John Wayne.
You know I'm
best.
special. You know it.
What
Well,
Western guy?
I'm just saying. It was much more fun.
there was
I mean,
like a Western guy. I don't know.
It's
The guy
more
with the
weird.
cowboy hat and a horse.
Yeah,
Walk
no.
funny.
That's funny.
Well, he wanted to be a cowboy when he grew up, the Western kind of cowboy.
That's
the
awesome.
horse kind of cowboy and cows. So, not that kind of cowboy.
Hmm.
Thank goodness. You would have really liked him. I just say that. Because he did not like the Cowboys.
That's
'cause
awesome.
He didn't watch football. So,
That's funny.
yeah, sorry. Just went left.
Before we go into anything else, I want to take a quick break real quick just to mention the Hub. Thank you for this space. Thank
My
you
pleasure.
for being a sponsor of the podcast. Hub is at 222 East Renfro.
Yes.
Here in Burleson.
Yes.
You can find more at hub222.net. Private offices, community space, basically connecting people to the resources they need for business and all that kind of stuff. So
Entrepreneur Launchpad.
absolutely.
Center of craziness some days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Don't look at me when you say
Get right in. I knew this would be great.
So if you need something in local business area, right, or local Burleson area for business, then the Hub is a great place to check out. And of course, Camille loves to connect people, and
I do.
that's your servant's heart. I think is just
Thanks.
helping people get connected to the right places.
Helping people help people. That was my old mission statement. Be prepared for the new statement. It's way
Oh.
cooler. Yeah.
Yeah,
cultivating.
awesome.
Cultivating. Like sowing impact. I don't know.
So
Ooh, you got him. Wrong order, but you got it.
yeah, okay.
there you go. So this will take us into the next question I had. I want to discuss mission statements.
I thought we had to have a break.
We,
was
we
that
just
it?
That was
Oh,
That was the commercial.
We're back.
that
Welcome
was our
back to
commercial break.
2020.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Gosh, this is... All right. So mission statements.
I have that
What?
impact on people.
Is happening.
I can't believe they even let
going
me
off the
come to
rails.
this church or even to my own job. Thank y'all very much for letting me to be here. Yeah,
that's
let's
funny.
say.
So we've been discussing mission statements a lot. We're going through a course right now, Mission Statement Made Simple, in the group coaching that we're doing. Mm-hmm. And I want to know your thoughts on how that impacts a culture of an organization whether it be a church, whether it be a corporate organization, whatever it is, and if you feel that there's been one that kind of stands out to you in your past,
or in your future.
Yes,
or in your future, yeah,
or
in the
current.
future. Kind of like the one we got now.
I know,
but
it's awesome.
the mission statement is only as important as the leadership will actually live to that. Okay. I've written, again, Fidelity and with Mervin's, mission statement writing. I think they almost could have put that on your performance review. How many mission statements have you written in the last 12 months? Because you write them up and they go, oh, yeah, it really sounds good. It's got to have this and got to have this and got to mean, send you in a direction. And okay, well, that's fine. And you write it and you go, and then you're done. Everybody claps. We put it on a logo or put it on a background. You go back to do what you were doing before. And a mission statement shouldn't send you back.
Right.
It should lead you forward.
Yep. And
that's where I think a lot of companies is like, what's your best mission statement? The one that you actually operate to. Mm-hmm. I saw one mission statement, and it was on a board, real fancy, nice glass board.
Yeah.
And it was the whole board, and I think they just stopped. They had a ... at the end because you have to go ask for the rest of the mission statement.
Gosh.
And it's like, well, that's really cool, and you have to be friendly, and you have to be nice, and you have to do this and do that. So, well, you were talking about character,
right?
You could have said character and took out about not much off your
right.
off your glass board that you bought. And I think the mission statement should define where you're wanting. Where do I want to go? What do I want us to be?
Right.
And a long one, big one, fancy one. The question is that behind on the mission statement, are you doing it?
Right.
And that's why this one that we had a mission statement. And I told our folks, and the first mission statement we had at Tabernacle was one that I had plagiarized from another church, a friend of ours. I go, okay, man, they don't care. Change a few words here and there, and okay, don't need all this and do that. And it's like, okay, it's Matthew 28. Go ye in all the world and preach the gospel. That's what we're supposed to be doing: preach and disciple. And so we had this mission statement, and we said, who knows the mission statement? No one knew the mission statement. Well, were we even you couldn't even read it and say, am I doing the mission statement?
Right.
And so we said, let's make it easy. Our mission statement is two things: evangelism and discipleship. That's the only reason why God's got a church here at all. It's the only reason why he's got a believer on earth. Evangelize and disciple. That's it. And so if you asked folks, after we kind of went through that a few times, what's our mission statement? Evangelize and disciple. Evangelize and disciple. So, got it. It's pretty simple. It's two words: evangelize and disciple. That's what our big old long mission statement said.
Big old long.
Big old long.
Or big old long.
Big old long.
Yeah.
That's my Kansas
like one word
coming out in me.
Yeah, forgive him. He's
big
from
long.
Kansas. I'm just going to say that.
But
we understand the cowboy situation
So
now. Okay.
No, you don't.
I think it goes deeper than that. I don't think we have enough time.
The truth comes out.
Yeah, you don't know.
That's another day.
Yeah, that's another day. That's another podcast.
Yes.
That'll be 3 minutes if the Texas listeners.
Awesome.
But I forgot what I was saying now. See, that's my ADD kicking in.
The mission statement.
The mission statement, I said, well, it's these two things. But then we found out, it says evangelize and disciple. Yeah, what is it? Evangelize and disciple. How do we do that?
Right.
What is it?
Crickets. Right.
Yeah, it's like, we forgot to define the definition. Mm-hmm. And so let's make sure when we put our mission statement together this time, it's still evangelize and disciple. I don't care how fancy a church gets, it's going to be evangelize and disciple. If it ain't those two things, and evangelize first, then you're not fulfilling the Great Commission at all. You are now a club. You're not a church anymore. Yep. And so we said, let's define it in our next mission statement. So the three things now that we have is we sow the gospel, we cultivate disciple. Let me phrase this correctly. We cultivate fit disciples, able to serve the kingdom. So that fit disciples is our code word for no snowflakes. So we are de-snowflaking as many as we can because we believe that in the future, Christianity, living a Christian life now, is somewhat difficult. It's going to get more difficult as the days are getting closer that the Lord's coming back. Persecution of the Christian is going to be, the believer or the Christian is going to be a lot tougher. Yep. And so if we're, you imagine if why aren't you witnessing anymore? Why aren't you inviting people? Why aren't you getting involved? And, well, someone so hurt my feelings, or they said this, or they looked at me this way, or, you know, and it's like, you got to get past that.
Right.
You know, this is not for the faint of heart. You know, Christianity is not for the faint of heart.
Right.
And emotions, sometimes aside, we say, you know, emotions are real, but emotions lie most of the time. And so you've got to be able to get past the, you know, I'm mad at her because she, you know, she didn't come up to me and say hi to me, and you know, so I'm mad at her. I'm angry. She's hurt me, and find out, well, she was trying to get out because she had to get to a hospital somewhere. My emotions lied.
Right.
You know, I felt that way, but it was wrong.
I never meant to hurt your feelings.
Yes, you did.
I really didn't. Well,
I think we know better.
No, I did not mean to hurt anyone's feelings.
Yeah.
I would like to comment on what you said, if I may.
Okay.
One of the things that I really appreciate. Oh, I can't.
Go for it.
I'm going to do it anyway. One of the things I really appreciate about what Ed's saying, this particular matter, is that, you know, evangelize and discipleship. That's a great mission statement. But, you know, and then I've always been a churchgoer, not the best one, but I will say, you know, this church, I feel very much more engaged and enriched, and I don't know, obviously it's a God thing, and we've got a great pastor. I'm expecting some kind of check for this or something, you know, like a discount.
I'll get you a coffee.
Let me keep going to church, okay?
Discount.
But what's so cool about that is that you say those things and you go to church and you believe in what you're doing. But I mean, what does that really mean? You know, I can go all day and not really think about which piece is evangelize, which piece is discipleship. So here recently, he's led a leadership training at our church. And what I thought was super cool about it is that it wasn't just for leaders. It wasn't just for teachers. I mean, you really encouraged our entire church to be a part of that. And I really think that you got a lot of good participation. And I think that that's probably the first time at any church I've felt so included in that my attendance there matters. Me showing up matters. And so if I feel that way, I know that everyone feels that way. And I think that that is something that is probably one of the greatest characteristics of a leader is including your tribe, or however your congregation,
Our tribe,
your
our
village,
clan.
your village, your tribe, your whatever you want to call it.
We have blue marks.
But I appreciate that as a member, because, you know, I mean, we do hold, I think historically, we hold our pastors and our leaders in a high position, and maybe feel like we are, you know, we don't have a voice. And I feel like you give everyone in there a voice, you know, and I think that's one of the best characteristics of a leader is to recognize that, you know, if you can be a leader of no one, and what kind of leader are you? But you're clearly a leader of, shall I call us a tribe? Or is that, we're not a cult.
No. We get accused that down the road,
exactly,
but it's like, you need to come over and find
it's funny
a
the things
loony bin, maybe, but not a cult.
And we've been called a lot of things. We won't go over all that. But being a part of many groups, in my whole 29 years of being on this earth, I love the way that.
I caught that. 29 years?
You're not supposed to lie in church. I'm not in church right now.
Hey.
I thought that was positive thinking. I'm optimistic.
That's mind over, it don't matter.
Yeah. And so, in just making me feel that way, and talking to other members of our church, you know, they're like, oh, well, we're supposed to be a part of this? That's what he said.
Yeah.
And, you know, you really got a lot of participation in that, which I think was, I mean, it's very, it's endearing, and it's motivating, and it's very, I can't think of all the words I want to say.
Well, I mean, I think the leader sets the vision, and then he says, like, okay, these are the things that we are working toward. These are the things that we're doing, right? We're going toward this mission. We're going to do these things, and whoever wants to come alongside. Like we're all a part of this, right? Yep. And it's that way in a church setting, because the church is the people, not the building, right? And it's that way in a business, where you have the leader that's, you know, saying, hey, in a year, in 3 years, in 5 years, this is what we want to do, and this is, you know, the vision for this company. If you don't fit here, like, exactly, and that's not where you want to go, then maybe you're not on the right bus, you know, that kind of thing. But
that's hard to say.
You do belong on another bus, you know. And it's the same thing in you know, we've been through church splits and that kind of stuff, and it's the same thing. Like, we didn't belong on that bus. We were there for a time. Now we found a different one, you know, and we belong there, and I know that. And it's one of those things that you look at the leader, you look at the person that is serving you as the servant leadership thing is happening.
Yes.
And you know that they're doing it for your best interest so that you can do it for other people's best interest,
Right.
and collectively you all move toward the same thing.
Yeah. You mentioned that about the mission statement, and that's leaders, that you spend, we'd fly to Boston, we'd fly to some remote location to sit down, and we're going to build this, and this is what we're going to do, and we build it, we do it, we rah, we go back, and the same wheels keep on, so no one changed the wheels on the bus. It's like we said we're going to, we need to off-road now. We need different wheels on the bus, and really taking that. And that's one of the things that I think is, because it's not, I appreciate what Camille is saying, but it's not just one leader. It's the leaders that you choose to put, they'll come alongside with you, and not, I want him because he does this. Before he does that, because he has this skill, before I look at the skill, we want to say, does he have a servant leader's heart? Yeah. If he doesn't, I don't care how good he is. I mean, he could be the greatest speaker. Sure. I mean, I had several years ago, back when you were 12, we had...
Because you're 29 now.
Because you're 29 now.
See why I like him.
But I was talking to the pastor about this when we first, I think it was introduced, the servant leadership concept. I mean, it got defined for me by that term, servant leader. Okay. And so I was sitting there talking to the pastor, watching the kids run around at camp, and we were talking, and I was going, how do you guys do that? How do you do servant leader? How do you do that? And the more I pressed on it, he finally goes, I'm not sure I actually agree that much with servant leadership. And I was like, wow, that explains why you can sit and watch somebody else do some work,
right,
and watch them,
right?
That's disgusting.
Well,
not that. I don't know that person.
Yeah,
but
he's a
No, well, I mean, what you're saying though.
But the idea is even amongst pastors that I haven't cornered the market on this, but even pastors that will talk about servant leadership, when it comes down to it, it still gets back to, are you paying attention? Now, you mentioned 4 parts of a pie. Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Okay, I'm trying to remember the emotional
physical,
part of it.
Intellectual, emotional, spiritual.
Okay, let's start with the intellectual part of it. If you're going to be a servant leader, intellectually, you've got to decide, I will get on my hands and knees. It's a personal. Yeah. I have to decide what it is. Now, I can't let it take away, God's called you to do this, and God's called me to do that, and I can't, you're doing your job and I'm doing mine. I can't necessarily take away from mine to do yours. Sure. That's not what the servant leadership's about necessarily. It is, as a leader, going, you're use this kind of illustration. You're scrubbing the floors with a toothbrush, and I'm going, as a leader, what can I do to make that better for them so it's easier, faster, quicker? They can get more. Let's get something bigger. Let's
Give them a mop.
Let's get a Zamboni in there or something. And you can drive it around. And, do something like that. That's
your level of vision. He's thinking Zamboni. You're thinking mop.
Well,
I'm trying to make it fun. She's trying to make it. It's less hard.
No, I'm going to go with that. I like that.
But that's where I think even in the leadership as a servant leader, again, paying attention intellectually. Not micromanaging, but knowing your different ministries well enough to know this is what they need, and sometimes you get, hey, we need these. We saw this at another church, and we need fancy things. It's like, well, no, we don't, because it's like, oh yeah, we do need that. Okay, who's going to manage that? Right. Who's going to keep up with the software on that? Who's going to do, because the first time it's out, what are you going to do? Right. It doesn't work. So, something as simple like, and we'd think it would be simple, is like, we'll just put a laptop in there. All we need is a laptop. Okay, we got my laptop, I got the admin's laptops, I got my associate's laptop, my other associate's got his own laptop, he uses Apple, I saw that on there, but we keep him anyway.
He also loves Apple.
Yeah, Apple and the Cowboys are two great tastes that go great together. Anyway, then we got our check-in systems, got laptops, we got a back, so we got laptops. It's like, okay, fine. And then what's happened is they start, this one's not working. That one's not working. I got this big thing on here that says it needs to restart. What do I do? Restart it. And so who's managing the software? Now it's getting back to my data processing. You got to have a management line for that. So they go, let's just let's just, and it's like, it's seldom just.
Right.
Right? You know, there's who's going to manage those things and deal. That's where I think the leader, if he's going to be a servant leader to the folks that are working, to do them justice, to see what they really need, and not necessarily get into it, but although in my past life, to understand, I did time and motion studies for our tape handlers, loading tape for the computers. It's a long time ago. Well, to do that, I went down. I had my admin schedule, me a 6-hour window. I went down and I loaded tapes. In my previous jobs, I had done that when I first started. But so let me see what's going on. And after I could get the feel with them, I could talk to them.
Yeah.
And they'd say, "Remember when you were?" "Yes, I do." So I knew then what can we put on the console? What can we do overhead? And we actually invented some new ways of doing. Invented. I mean, it had not been done anywhere else. So it was improving, mount times and measuring mount times and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes you got to be willing to get in the weeds with that, because especially if you're trying to innovate. I think and I don't want to belittle this, but I think in the larger churches you got a large pool of people to pull from, and you say something that's up their alley, and they're probably willing to step in sometimes. In a smaller church like ours, you got to figure out, how do I make this so that it's as easy as possible? Not that they can't figure it out, but they just aren't going to have a lot of time to spend on it. And the other side of that, if they're not there, now it's become a part of what we call a critical path, right? Now it's got to be in there. So now what do we do?
Right.
Having either a backup person to do it, or, some cases, while things have been given off and handed off to other people, if push comes to shove, like the sound room stuff, I can still step back there and, of course, part of it, I have a tech background, so I can step in there and maybe do something and get it kicked off. But that's where I think sometimes leaders are falling short. I like something I'd heard, or I read it about CEOs, and and this is a shame. This is a shame. I think the CEOs were probably going, "That's what we're supposed to do." You know what a CEO is going to do the first year they're in? They're going to cut.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to cut staff, and they're going to cut staff because that's the easiest way for them to show in their first year they saved the company money.
Right. And
it's good, but it's also very self-serving. Very self-serving. When you say, well, if you're going to be a CEO and you really want to change something, I can think of one CEO we had. Won't name him either.
What's his name?
What's his name? You can call him Al, but that's dating too, isn't it? That song, you can call him Al. But he came in. Of course, he did do some cuts, but then he started saying, we're going to change the way we think, and probably the biggest, not incremental change. Our owner was a Kaizen guy, right? Incremental changes. Okay. You're familiar with Kaizen?
I'm not familiar with that.
You're not?
No.
Heard of it.
Yeah. It's interesting.
You can explain it to me later.
Different time.
Okay.
Different time. But then he said, we're not going to do, incremental change is great, but where we are at and where we need to go, we need to make step changes. We need to flip this thing. And brutal, we called him, we said, this guy manages by body count. I don't care who dies, we're going to change this. Right. We'll win the war, we'll lose the people. Right. Was that called Pyrrhic Wars?
Sounds brutal.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was tough, and a lot of people quit. So I'm just not putting up with that.
Right.
But they did something that was that. At Fidelity, they did something that encouraged people. They backed up money trucks to a bunch of us and go, stay. Okay, beat me up some more. Right. So you could hang with. But I'm glad that they did. I'm glad that they backed up the money truck. But there's stuff that we learned from that.
You're forced to make decisions.
And
in
those
that
things that we
environment.
the things that we learned there, is carried over into the church. You don't quit.
Yeah.
You figure out what the solution is.
Right.
People aren't getting along. Figure out how to make it work. And you said it earlier, where sometimes and it's hard. It's hard to say. And I tell you, you get kicked out of the pastors club for saying this, but this may not be the church for you.
Right.
And I remember a couple that they were my youth pastors when we first got there, and she went to school. She felt the calling to do sign language. She wanted to do that, and so she got it and got whatever degree or certification you got for being able to talk with your hands. It's really cool. But other than people, when we sing a Christmas song and they get up and do that,
right?
It didn't. It's like, I hate to say this, I love you. You got to go somewhere where you can use that.
Yeah.
The deaf people we have here are deaf because they don't want to hear.
Because they don't have their hearing aids.
They don't turn their hearing aids on.
Right.
And so it was a tough call. But that's the other side of. That's the other piece of this leadership is. Some pastors. Use the same pastor I was talking to before. There for years at the church, we sang a cappella because we didn't have a piano player would step up, and then Darla. She felt sorry for me, and she, one of the ladies at the church, she stepped up. She goes, I can play a little bit. And then she goes up, does all this, and goes, yeah, a little bit, right?
A little bit like Beethoven, Bach.
I've been a little bit playing for 40 years.
Yeah. And she actually, a bass, she goes, I don't play piano, I play bass. And then she does this. I go, okay. But I asked him, I go, how many piano players do you have in your church? And he says, I don't know, probably 6 or 7. I said, are you using them all? He goes, no, we only use like 1 or 2. I says, why don't you send one to me? And you'd have thought that I kicked him in the head. And I said, well, you know what? If I had 6 piano players and I couldn't use them and you needed one, I would suggest that they go.
Yeah.
But that's just a different, mind. If part of my servant leadership is giving them the tools and then giving them the opportunity. And if I can't give them the opportunity, or I say if our church ministries don't afford them that opportunity,
right,
then say, here's a church over here you can go to.
Right.
And some people go, well, you're trying to kick them out of your church? Well, you've missed the whole boat.
Yeah.
The whole thing is my job is to help them find the ministry that God's actually called them to. Yeah. And if it's at our church, let's buckle up and go. But if it's not, I got to be honest about that.
Yeah.
And that's also, again, there's pastors going, kick him out of the club, kick him out of the club. You can't do that. You can't do that. But imagine how some of our church, the smaller churches, would begin to really move forward if some of those larger churches would look at their ministries that way. A pastor would say, you know what, I know, because this is my purview, and I'm looking from outside the window in its thick pane glass, is that the larger churches are fellowshipping with the larger churches. They all talk about all their stuff that they do, and us, the smaller churches, can't understand their issues, and they've already walked past our issues and stuff like that. But you say, Pastor, you've got 6 piano players, and your job is to help them fulfill their ministry, even if it's not at your church.
Right.
And after they woke up from their passing out, they say, you know what, maybe we need to see if we can ferret that out,
Well, I'd like to interject because you guys have something very much in common when you say that. I can appreciate that, and I think I would be interested to know long term what that sign person would tell you. Now, thank you for giving me that leap, because there's no telling who she was able to touch by just changing that environment.
That's exactly right.
And Jared has a podcast, and no one pays me to say this, but I mean, he will be very quick to tell you, I'm not for everyone. This is not for everyone. And I can appreciate that. Just like here at the Hub, we're not for everyone. I know there's certain people that aren't going to grow here, or they're not going to be fed here. And so you want to have that suggestion to say, you know what, but here's a place, and give them those opportunities and look back and see where the growth happens and see where the miracle arrived, because if you don't, it's scary and you get kicked out of the preacher's club or whatever. But, and I've heard more than one person talk about both of you and appreciating you saying this is not for everyone, and watching you in action, this is not for everyone. Because I think as an individual, if you can't appreciate that, then you're missing the mark, because it's not out of, like you said, it's not because we don't need one more piano person here. Right. It's because I don't know. I mean, there's an ability to serve, and it doesn't have to be for us. And I think that's where a good leader also shines, is that it's not a selfish position.
Right, and you can't be all things to all people. Like,
exactly.
You can't. I mean,
no.
You go back to, even the teachings of Jesus that we've talked about, like, he wasn't all things to all people. Like, he was, this is why I came, this is who I'm serving, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going.
Yeah.
Like, it was, and there was a lot of people that were obviously against that,
Right.
I mean, we know the stories,
Yeah.
We say he was inclusive,
Yeah.
but he is exclusive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Say
I
that again.
like the, what's that?
Say that again.
He was inclusive, but he was exclusive.
Yeah.
I mean, he is exclusive. And I think John 6 is a great example. They were following Jesus. I mean, he had a throng of people that were
Right.
following him, waiting for the next meal, right? Waiting for the next meal.
Yeah.
And now a good mega church pastor would not have done this. Jesus does this. He turns around and says, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no part with me.
Yeah.
And well, if you're who you say you are, why don't you give us manna from heaven like Moses did? Moses never did that. God did it.
Right.
And he says, and it's strange too, and this is kind of how people forget.
Yeah.
Just fed you just a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, give us some more of that. And they were following him for the food. They were following him for what's the next thing you'll give. And it's the in some of those seeker sensitive type of mentality is more of creating consumerism in the body of Christ instead of creating producers for the church. So that's and by the time it was done, by the time Jesus got done explaining and talking to them, this crowd had left. And he turns to his disciples and said, will you go also? And it's Peter that said, where will we go? Thou hast the words of life. But after he gets done, he ends up with 12. By the way, one of the 12 is going to he's going to betray you too.
Right.
But he's still following. So
Right.
it's a tough statement. But like you said, we're not all things to all people. When we have people that say, well, I'm thinking about joining, let's talk.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this. And here's how we run our business meetings. And here's, because some people coming from other small churches, they remember business meetings where, you vote on the toilet paper, you vote on the paper towels, you vote on the tea, and you vote on the coffee. And it's like, we don't do that.
Right, yeah.
We're voting on what we're doing in projects.
Right.
I assume if the air conditioning goes out, that you want me to buy another air conditioner.
Right.
We don't have to vote on that.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
understanding where we're doing that. But that's part of that whole leadership. So some people go, well, I think you should. And I remember I had some people come in and says, well, that our church, they don't even do business meetings, and we didn't even know what was going on. And it's like, come on, we'll tell you what's going on, tell you where we're going, and then they'll come and I'm glad. About 6 or 7 months being into the in the church, they go, yeah, it's okay. They don't. Do they go to the business meetings? No, they don't go. Why? Well, either it's too boring. I don't think our business meetings are boring, but some of the hardest laughing I've ever done is at a business meeting, not at something, but because of something.
Yeah.
But again, that's part of I think what you were saying. There's nothing hidden. There's, I know this word gets tossed around a lot, especially in our political system, but transparency. If you want to know where we're spending the money, get with our treasurer. He'll open up the QuickBooks and show you where we spent everything, what missionaries we sent to, the whole 9 yards. So,
Right.
And they go, well, you said, I remember someone saying this to me, so, well, you said this, but you really meant this. And I go, no, I said this. Yeah. I said, that's what I meant. And I think that's one of the things my admins and some of the others can say, well, what did he really mean by that? What did he say?
Right.
He said this. Well, that's what he meant.
Yep.
So, and that's, again, servant leadership in the maybe in the emotional part with other people is, if this is what there's no hidden agenda. Mm-hmm. You're transparent to folks when you're talking to them, and they're not looking at you going, okay, did he mean something else? And that's also on the spiritual line, because there's a lot of skepticism about what people, what are those pastors doing? Well, in our business meeting, I'm not going to ask for a new jet. Okay.
Right. Yeah, we didn't approve that. By the way.
Yeah, we didn't approve that.
But jets are awesome.
Yeah, but the team or the tool. Okay. They got me an ultralight.
Jet.
Yeah, they got me an ultralight. And, but that's the can you trust that there's no hidden agenda behind what I'm saying?
Right.
Now some people don't like the candor, but I believe I truly believe that. Well, I don't believe that Scripture says flattery is bad. Flattering somebody else is because you're trying to get something yourself. Yeah. Working for telling the truth and encouraging somebody, that's an entirely different animal.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And and there's some at the church that ask for it, and some of them kind of demand it. Tell me the truth. Don't beat around the bush. And then other people, oh, he won't.
Right.
And then there's some that I don't want. I don't want to be mentored by you. I don't want that, and I'm fine. I'm good where I'm at.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's because I want to be, I want to be great here, and not actually say how is it working out there, and so so the spiritual part of that is that being clear, and if we're to be and Paul tells us to be an example to the flock, the pastors to be an example to the flock, which means to those of you that are that might be thinking, well, I serve God. You're right. Pastor can't. Pastor has no say in this. Well, you remember, and I like what our evangelist said last night. The shepherd's not always right, but he's still the shepherd. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm to be an example of flock, if you see me on my hands and knees scrubbing something, like Jesus back with washing feet. Yeah. If I will wash feet, and the interesting thing of this is that, remember when John the Baptist said, there's one that comes before me that I'm not worthy to unlatch his shoe, let alone wash his feet. Right. That was something in their culture that you couldn't, of all the things that you could make a slave do, you could not make them wash your feet. Couldn't make them wash your feet. And so what he's saying, even a thing that a slave is not required to do, I'm not worthy to do that to this one that comes. Right. Talking about Jesus. And then what does Jesus do? There, when you get into the last chapters before he's crucified, he does the very thing that a slave wasn't required to do. He does that. He says, now if I will do this, he says, you say that I'm your Lord, and you're right. Mm-hmm. So if I would do this, what will you do? Yeah. And I tell you what, that's where in churches and in business, that's where you see a separation occur. Yeah. I want to be a servant leader. I want to be a servant leader, and then you stand and watch somebody else
take out the trash.
Or they go, or they think they're a servant leader. They walk past a cup, that's on the floor, and they go, well, someone needs to pick that. I'm going to go tell somebody to pick that up. Well, the time that it take you to tell them, you could have picked it up and done something with it, and walk past. That's where you go back to paying attention. And I think that's in the other part of your pie, the physical part of it. I'm willing to talk about it, but am I willing to do it?
Yeah, that's true.
Jesus didn't say, be feet washers, be feet washers, be feet washers. He never said that first. He did it first. Yeah. Right? Let me show you.
That's the whole follow me thing.
Follow me.
Right? Like, I mean, do as I do.
If I'm the Lord and I'll do it, then are you and folks don't realize this sometimes when they think this. You're telling God, or you're telling Christ, it was okay for you to do that, but that's beneath me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah, where are you elevating yourself to?
Yeah, and don't realize, you just said, Jesus, you need to scoot over. I'm supposed to be at the right hand of the Father. And they go, oh, no, I'd never say that. It's not what you say, it's what you do.
It's what you do, yeah.
So,
well, we do need to wrap up. We are at, we've gone a little over an hour now, I think. So,
oh, wow.
Time flies. We're doing this.
I wish you weren't so shy and had more to say.
Yeah, that's true.
Sorry.
Just pulling the information out of him, it's just
yeah.
It's been a great conversation.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
really
got
love
no questions on that?
No, we had a lot of great comments.
We've had a couple.
We'd rather hear from you, so we'll comment on those later.
Yeah. Something about wrong.
I like the questions better. The Bible questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I operate better.
Well, come on Sunday night to Tabernacle Baptist Church. There.
Another commercial?
Yeah.
So thanks for coming on. I love this topic of servant leadership. I think that we all could do a better job of it. I think Camille does a really good job around the hub, like doing things and always like looking for something else she can add to, the tenant tier and being able to help and all that. So
thank you.
I appreciate that.
She went and got me a coffee.
Yeah,
I sure did. And I don't normally get up that early.
Yeah.
So,
she does not. She usually skirts in here
She's
2
right.
minutes till.
Do these things really cost $10? She told me I owed her $10.
Yeah, I'm going to bill you for that. I'll take it out of my tithe.
Put that on my teeth.
I'm going to remember that coffee. No, I'm just
That's
kidding.
awesome.
So kidding.
Well, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it. Ed Mathews, everyone, if you have questions, be sure to drop them in the comments. If you liked this, be sure to share it.
Yeah.
If you like the podcast, be sure to share it. And also subscribe. We are on all of the podcast networks, Spotify, Apple, Google, and anywhere else you can listen to podcasts. So there we go. That's a wrap for the week, I guess. So Taylor, will you
Have a
sign us
great
out
week
here?
and do your thing.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Cultivate Podcast. See you next week.